Like Ken Kratz was able to be a prosecutor. You can edit that out if you want. Making a Murder.
Oh, is that what it was? Have you guys ever seen that? Have you guys ever watched that show, Making a Murder?
Watched it.
I have.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that? Are you like, or
I mean, it is one of the reasons I almost went to school in Wisconsin. You know, when you think about, I wouldn't have to take a bar exam in 3 years, but I stayed in Minnesota.
So what are the main goals of the Board of Law Examiners, and why is the Board of Law Examiners important for lawyers to understand and to know what you do and how you're helpful in making us good professionals?
I think primarily it's just the protection of the public, and that's the purpose behind the board, to ensure that those who are entrusted with helping the public have the necessary competence and character to practice law.
Do you guys reject a lot of applicants that apply for positions there, especially when it comes to if they have a criminal background or they haven't disclosed something, or do you get a lot of people who just aren't able to make it past your kind of wall that you put up to make sure that people are admitted are of good character?
I think we looked at the numbers actually before we came to St. Thomas earlier this week, and I believe it was 93.3% of individuals who took the bar exam in July were able to make it to the admission ceremony in October. They passed character and fitness. So not many ultimately, don't make the admission ceremony or are not ultimately licensed. We don't deny many folks.
No, the denial numbers are very small. There may be delays in the application process if somebody has a serious issue in their background, or one of the biggest reasons for delay is that people don't provide timely responses when we request information.
So what is the scrutiny like about looking into one's background? Because I know, I've heard different kind of rumors.
Anthony's nervous.
Yeah,
Anthony's
I'm super nervous. like if you ever been fired from a job, if you got traffic tickets, things like that. Are these all things that just should be disclosed at some point? I don't remember every single traffic ticket I've ever gotten from parking, but I mean, are those things that are if you don't disclose that could waive your right to become or to go to the admission ceremony or something?
We always say that the more likely it is that you might forget, the less of a problem it will be. If it's something that's serious and then the response is that you didn't recall it, it's going to raise more questions with us. For example, if somebody was convicted of shoplifting their second year of law school and they went to court and they took a continuance plea deal and then states to the board that they just forgot about that when they set in their application, that's probably not going to be believable. If somebody has a speeding ticket from 20 years ago and they forget that speeding ticket and we find out and ask them about it and they say they forgot, we're probably going to believe that that actually was the case.
So you guys do look into speeding tickets and
parking tickets?
Not paid parking tickets.
Okay, because I used to live on Grand, right 5 minutes from Hammond.
So if you see that come in through his application,
we lived in an apartment that was technically on their business side of it, and there was apartments all over, and there was no off-street parking, so I had to park on the street. So every week I'd get a ticket or something.
Yeah. I'm the queen of parking tickets too.
Yeah, so I'm do I need to be disclosing every single one because I don't know if I can keep track of them.
As long as you pay them.
Yeah, I never not paid one. So,
sure. And too, I mean, the thing is we want people to use their best ability, and if the information is not as readily available, then we just want to know that the person has made an attempt to locate it.
And so what about those speeding tickets? If
you have a lot, if someone has, say 10 in 10 years, then we may ask for a traffic statement. But most people, a speeding ticket here or there is not going to be an issue.
Okay.
And then also for the more serious crime, I know people who are practicing, and they told me stories that as long as you disclose everything, you should be fine. I know some attorneys that had prior DWIs before taking the bar. Are these things is it make it a harder hurdle to get license, or is it more just going to show that you acknowledge that you had a DWI or something?
Well, I think one of the main things that the board has concerns with is candor and honesty. So if you are forthcoming about those issues, you're going to have a lot easier time making it through the character and fitness process. It's when people try and downplay or, those types of things that they may face challenges and delays. So it's always best to just be honest, no matter what the past issue was or the crime was, because chances are we will find it and we'll ask you about it, and it's best that you've disclosed it in the first place.
So why do you think, given what you've said, why do you think people try to hide that from the bar when really you're just looking for openness and honesty? Why would they try and hide?
I think it's fear. I mean, I remember when I was applying to the bar and I really didn't have anything super serious in my background, but I was more afraid of turning in my character and fitness background than I was for sitting for the bar. And so I think that if you have something that is probably not your favorite moment in your life, it's hard to write it all down and own that. And I can understand why someone may not want to disclose that, but it is always better to just disclose it to the board. And keep in mind that the applications are completely confidential. We have confidentiality provisions. We do not disclose them to anyone, and except within the limitations that the rule permits, which would be to another bar jurisdiction, etc. But I think it's fear.
And how far back do you guys do your background? Is it 18 and above, or do they look at high school records, things like that, like people who are bullies in high school, things like that? I'm just asking because some people have. Because
you were bullied in high school? Is that what you're trying to say to us?
I was bullied in high school.
By Hannah, too.
Yeah, right? Hannah shoving me in the lockers.
It's always Hannah.
It's always Hannah. But things like that, how far back do they typically look?
For criminal convictions and records, we would look back
as far as your history?
Right, exactly. Things like residence history and employment history, we only go back to age 18.
Okay. And so let's say you have a podcast and you've said a bunch of stuff on this podcast. Would you guys look into any of that?
Yeah, how extensive is this?
Yeah, that's what we need to know.
Combing through my MySpace from 2006.
I might have to take down some of these episodes.
Right. No, I mean, we definitely do a thorough investigation into individuals, and we will look at different issues, but we're really factoring it into whether or not somebody is able to meet the essential eligibility requirements. And so if it's something that would directly impact those, and that's why we look at the candor, that's why we look at whether somebody has the ability to obey the law, etc., is that we really are looking at those factors in the investigation.
Have you ever had any kind of documentation, like someone was over afraid, so they over disclose, when I was 6 I stepped on a frog, and when I was 8 I pushed my sister into a lake or something like that? Have you ever seen those kind of applications where they try to get everything out so they don't miss anything?
Yes.
I can see myself doing that.
How many frogs did you step on?
I stepped on worms when I was a little kid. That was weird. Off the record.
Put a flag in.
Yeah, put a flag.
Yeah, don't put it. So don't put that on your application. And so, besides not passing the bar exam, what do you see as the biggest disqualifiers as someone getting in? Besides what we talked about with just not disclosing.
Serious issues that involve candor, criminal convictions that involve some type of fraud or conduct similar to that. Also, somebody who has issues with chemical dependency that maybe they haven't addressed. And that's why one of the reasons, that we do go into the law schools is to encourage people that if there is anything that needs to be addressed, to start that process early because it's viewed very favorably by the board as opposed to at the time of the application.
So in terms of chemical dependency, you'll look to see if they're how do you do an investigation where it's trying to see if they're still an alcoholic or still addicted to some sort of drug?
We ask for alcohol use statements in our correspondence with the applicants. We can ask for sobriety affidavits. We can ask what rehabilitation they have done, what methods they have been using to maintain sobriety, if they, go to AA, things like that. We can communicate with them about that.
So if they were to be in AA, would you see that? I mean, first, I assume they have to disclose something like that, but then also that may not be disqualifying. It actually may help their case in terms of they're actually getting rehabilitated?
That would definitely be viewed as a positive thing by the board. As anyone that's addressing their issues, chemical or otherwise, that's absolutely a positive step.
because we've talked a lot about wellness in our podcast. In fact, we did an entire episode on it, and there's a lot of chemical dependency. There's a lot of hiding of chemical dependency. I mean, did you guys, when you guys were in law school, did you see a lot of that as well? And looking at the bar exam, is that probably the biggest thing you're trying to nip out?
I don't remember seeing very much of it in law school. I wonder if it's actually different now or if it's more prevalent. I don't recall seeing much of that.
I don't recall people talking about it as much.
Yeah, it's
I
still
think
kinda
now
hush-hush,
there's
I think.
a
Stigma
little bit
back
more
then.
right. And two, what the board is looking at is, does somebody have the resources and the support network in place so that if something does become a problem in practice, they have the ability to address it.
Do you guys have any final words of advice for somebody who's, first taking the bar exam? What would you say in terms of both passing the bar exam and then also secondly, getting through you guys on the professional responsibility portion?
Sure. So I would say, as far as taking the bar exam, just practice and go to the National Conference's website and look at the resources that are available there. They have excellent resources. And really that is just the best way to prepare for the examination. And on the character and fitness side, don't be as stressed out about it as I was. If you do have any questions, we do have an anonymous call line where you can call our office and ask and kind of put your mind at ease on some of those questions. And if there is something in your background that we think might be an issue, we might have some ideas on things that you might be able to do between now and the time that you apply for the bar.
Do they rotate out different topics, or is it always like the same topics that'll be on the bar exam, or do they have like an experimental section kind of thing, or
There's not really, well, I mean,
like a guinea pig section?
Yeah, there is not a guinea pig section on the bar exam. However, on the multi-state bar exam, there are what they call pre-test questions, and those are ones that are going to be used on future exams, and they want to see how they will perform with real live students. The questions are embedded into the test instrument, and we don't recommend that people spend a lot of time trying to figure out which 25 are the test questions and which 175 are being scored.
And so there's also a federal bar, right? And do you get into that when you pass the Minnesota bar?
So to be admitted into federal district court, there's a different process that you follow, but it isn't. You don't get admitted to the federal bar when you are admitted in Minnesota, but once you have licensure in a jurisdiction, then you can apply to the federal bar.
Is it easier to do, or is it just another test to get into the federal bar?
I think it was a payment of $25 and affirmation by somebody at my firm that I was okay.
Yep.
You're okay. What do they mean by okay? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
People have heard me on this podcast.
So does that mean it's easy? Like, if you can, you should just get some federal bar admission just for the sake of having that, or?
I think it probably depends on what you want to practice. I practiced in bankruptcy for a while, and so it made sense because you have to be licensed in federal court to practice bankruptcy law.
Okay.
Right. And most of us at the Attorney General's office were licensed too. And it was just a payment and a one-page affidavit. So nothing compared to...
Yeah, I was in for another, I don't know if I can do 3 days of testing.
Yeah.
So you don't really have to sit for another exam in each state that you want to be a member of. Like if I move to like California, maybe that's it.
California, you will need to sit, yeah.
Okay, let's say I move to Missouri. What would I need to do to get relicensed in a state like that? Are these kind of big movements that I'd have to do? Please tell me I wouldn't have to take another test.
It depends. It depends on when you apply. But if you were to go to Missouri right away, Missouri's cut score is also 260. So if you've passed Minnesota, you would be able to transfer that score into Missouri, but you would also have to pass character and fitness in Missouri.
Okay, now what about California? Don't do it, is that?
You have to take the California bar, I believe.
You do.
I hear that one's a really hard bar, too. Like, I have a few attorneys that say they're licensed in California, too, and they said that it was way more difficult than the Minnesota one.
The cut score is higher in California.
Okay, maybe that was it.
Okay. I was just watching a lawyer movie, too, and there were, like, people from Boston, and they're like, oh, we're working on this case in California, and they're like, oh, they just hop in and start practicing law in California. I'm like, yeah, it probably doesn't work out that way.
Well, you could be pro-hawked in, can't you? Pro-hawk vice?
You can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot that you see on TV is not real life.
Yeah, that too. That's probably
That's the whole reason I became a lawyer.
This is brand new information.
All right.
That was awesome, though. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for coming in.
Yeah.